Other trivia. It follows the 70s and the 60s, which were also books by our guest author and broadcaster Ted Yates. Good to see you.
Hey, great to be here, Ted.
We should point out that at one point in our lives, we both worked at Peterborough, across the
That's
street from each other.
That's right. And back in the mid-'70s, you were broadcasting.
That's right.
The same time I was.
That's right.
Competition.
Yes.
Now, you know what I love about this book is this is one of these things, and we talked about this, is that you can just pick it up at any given time and any given page. You don't have to read it in any order, and it brings back a lot of memories. And some of them are, oh, I remember that. That's a great song. And some of them are, what a piece of.
What do you think, though? How does the 80s stack up against the 70s?
Well,
I like the 70s better.
Oh, me too.
It depends on what time you grew up. You know,
Okay.
whenever you were a teenager, whatever that music is, let's say when you're 18,
Right.
that music will live with you forever, and you have that emotional attachment to it. So it depends. And there is a lot of great music in the 80s as well, a lot of different genres of music.
Right.
I mean, it was the decade of Michael Jackson's most successful years, and Madonna, and Billy Joel was huge then.
Now, was
Phil
this off
Collins.
the wall era, Michael Jackson?
This was the Thriller decade.
Okay, the Thriller decade.
I mean, that was the biggest selling album of all, and all the singles that came from that. And then Madonna, who was just announced a few days ago as the Forbes top music celebrity, and as far as #1 on the money-making list, and here she is after all these years, still doing well.
And you've got all these different categories. Like, for example, here's 1983, the top R&B soul hits, top one-hit wonders, top lost 45s, top party hits. And in fact, I'm looking through the top one-hit wonders, and here's a song, interesting song by a group called Weather Girls, called It's Rainin' Men.
Yes.
You know who wrote that song?
Yeah, Paul Schaefer.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So
Yeah.
there's one of those things. There's all kinds of trivia and fascinating facts with every single song that you can imagine from the 80s and then some. And there was the decade of MTV. You had to have a really good video in many cases to support that song on the radio.
Transition.
Some of
Well,
the
there
videos.
was no World Wide Web then.
No,
It
no,
didn't
there
start
wasn't.
until
No,
No.
it was
1990.
And the compact disc arrived in the 80s, so we went from cassettes to the compact disc.
And then bands had to become visual.
Yes.
You couldn't be just this great guy with a great
Yeah.
voice singing. You had to be have
Right.
a visual act.
And there was a pretty boy group like Duran Duran who
Right.
did very well because of that. They were made for TV. And there's some of the greatest videos came out of the 80s with directors like David Fincher, who later became a
Right.
big-time movie director. He directed dozens of the biggest videos of the 80s, including the biggest from Paula Abdul and Madonna, a $5 million budget for the Express Yourself video.
Wow.
I mean, how do you make
Yeah.
that money back in one song? It's just
You
amazing.
don't, do you?
I don't think you do.
But those albums sold, though.
Oh, they did.
Oh, big time. They
And
don't
that-
sell like that now.
And now, David Fincher, of course, the director of so many great movies, Seven, The Game, The Social Network, Benjamin Button, Fight Club,
Wow.
and the
Brand
girl,
new one, too.
Yeah, that girl with the dragon tattoo.
That's right.
He did all of those
Amazing.
movies.
You know what's interesting too is these are just some things that popped into my head here as I'm going through the book. Top 18 instrumental hits of the 80s. One of them was the theme for Hill Street Blues.
That's right, yeah.
That was, who did that?
Mike Post.
Mike Post,
Yeah,
right.
Mike Post did a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff. And in the
Yeah.
70s, of course, Rockford Files, and he did the A-Team. And
I wonder
so
how many television themes made it to top 20 positions over the years.
A
Probably a lot. Huh?
Yeah, there were a
Yeah.
lot, especially in the 60s and 70s too. When you think of the 70s,
That's right.
You know, Happy Days of Welcome Back, Kotter, and you know, Laverne and Shirley, and all of those. But yeah, in every year, there's not only the top 118 hits, but more hits below that, and then of course the top 18 albums of each year, the one-hit wonders. And it's interesting. I mean, the one-hit wonders are pretty amazing when you think of, you know, they had one great hit, and that was it. When you look at the 80s, you've got artists like Gary Newman, Cars,
Yeah.
that was it.
That
Lip
was it,
Sync,
yeah.
Funky Town,
Yeah.
and so many other like, and some of the songs like remember Romeo's Tune, Steve Forbert, great song.
Yeah.
A Lost 45, and there's many of the Lost 45s for each year as well.
And was that also the time of Casey and the Sunshine Boys?
Well, yeah, this Casey,
Sunshine Band.
they had most of
Yeah.
their success in the late 70s.
Late
But in
70s,
the early
early
80s,
80s.
Please Don't Go was
Okay.
a big hit.
Yeah.
So it was a transition. We were out of disco in the 80s and into
Right.
techno and new wave.
And punk.
You
Yeah.
got a thing here, top 18 acting singers of the 80s. Streisand, Bette Midler, Diana Ross, Cher, Olivia Newton-John, Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, Willie Nelson, Whitney Houston, Vanessa Williams, Rick Springfield. What was he in?
Yeah, he was. He was in a movie. Had a couple of movies actually back then,
Really?
and of course he acted on General Hospital as Dr. Noah Drake. That was his claim
That's
to
right.
fame.
Oh, I must have missed that year.
Yeah, so you weren't doing the daytime TV
wasn't.
soap operas
No.
back then, Ted?
Irene Cara, was she on Fame?
Yes.
Yes.
David
So-
Bowie, Madonna,
Yeah, they all had hits. So this is that.
Prince. What kind of acting did Prince do?
He was in a few movies. Yeah, Purple Rain.
Oh, wasn't
Purple
he?
Rain,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they all had hits. So there's different areas in here in between each year.
Phil Collins was an
Unique
actor.
features. Yeah, Buster. That's a forgotten movie. Had the
British
feature-
one?
Yeah.
That's a British
With
film.
Julia Walters. Featured the song "A Groovy Kind of Love"
Right.
and Two Hearts.
That was Wayne Fontella.
Fontana.
Yeah,
Wayne
actually
Fontana.
the Mindbenders. Yeah,
the
did it
Mindbenders, the
originally.
original version.
Written by a then teenage Carol Bayer Sager. That song.
Ah.
Wow.
With Tony Wine.
Great
And
song.
who did the remake of it?
It was Phil Collins.
Phil
The
Collins.
Groovy Kind of Love. Yeah.
And it was a great version.
It
of
was,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, he had a lot of success in the '80s. Elton John was huge.
You know
in the
something?
80s as well.
He dominated radio in Toronto.
Who?
Phil Collins.
Yeah.
I
With-
mean, it
With
just
and without
killed me.
Genesis, I mean,
Yeah.
he had the Genesis career
One
happening
side.
at the same time as his solo career.
But that was good. Everything else is, it was like, here come the drums. Doo, 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 yeah, doo, doo, doo. Oh, shut up!
One more time.
And how about the great party hits of the '80s? Footloose, Jump. There's Stars in
Pointer
45.
Sisters.
Remember Stars in
Yeah.
45? And Rock Lobster, the B-52, started the
Yeah,
decade.
yeah, that was fun.
That was
That
one
was
of
a
those
fun song.
things you might do at a dance at the end of the night, right? At a wedding. Much more fun than the Macarena, don't you think?
Macarena was. I was glad that was gone.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of...
You know, when it goes into the wedding, it's over.
yeah.
The Macarena became a wedding song.
Yeah, it's
it
no
was,
longer
it was off
cool,
the
right?
map, right?
And then there's
Well,
also...
when it's a wedding song and it's the first dance of the bride and groom, that's when you know. That's when you know you got a bad marriage coming up.
And there's also a section of the top 118 by British artists, by American artists, by Canadian artists. That you can also see, how successful, these
How did
songs were.
Queen do during that time?
They did very well. Yeah.
I tell you, that's the greatest singer ever. Freddie
Yeah,
Mercury.
Crazy Little Thing Called Love in the '80s.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff was in the '70s, Bohemian Rhapsody, but they had some good music
I
in
tell
the
you,
'80s
he was
as
the
well.
best male voice
Yeah.
of the time.
It's kind of a creepy one that you got here. 80s dead music stars. Had they lived, how old would these music stars be today?
Yes.
Like Karen Carpenter, for example. She would have been only 63.
Yeah, because what, she's
Right.
37, 35
That's
when
right.
she died?
And this is as of the end of
Harry Chapin
2013.
would have been 71.
Right.
Yeah.
And look at some of the other ones.
How about Janice? Well, she's 70s. Sorry.
Yeah, she didn't make the '80s.
She wasn't
She
an
didn't.
80s
She was like, what, 27?
because we lost her in 1970.
Yeah,
in the
that's
fall
right,
of
so-
'70, and then of course Pearl, her album, and Me and Bobby McGee was a hit posthumously, number one, like 4 or 5 months after her death.
Right.
So she never saw the success of that.
No. And not much of this stuff before either.
So
No.
you see how young
Yes.
some of these artists were, right?
Uh-huh.
And we're coming up to the anniversary of John Lennon's assassination. Of course, the first year of the '80s, 1980, December 8th. I was on the air at the time that it was announced, or I announced it, and that was quite shocking.
Yeah.
And you were somewhere. I don't know. Were you in Toronto at that time?
Yes.
Ted?
Yeah.
Right.
I think I was. What year was that?
1980, December 8th.
I think I was at Cute.
Yeah.
Or maybe I was at CFNY, or maybe I was in jail. I'm not sure.
Did you have a favorite song of that time?
Of what, the 80s?
Yeah, that
No.
you played every day on Q?
No. No.
You kept playing the 70s stuff.
Right.
I don't think I was at Q in the 80s. I was there at the beginning.
In it?
When did they sign on? 77?
Might be.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I bet you somebody out there is yelling, "Well, this is it. Go Smitty, you idiot, you were there."
And then again, one-hit wonders like Dexy's Midnight Runners. Remember their big hit, "Come On, Eileen"?
Oh, yeah.
A Celtic,
Had
refreshingly
a lot of
different
fun with that song.
With a fiddle.
Back in a moment with Ted Yates. The book's called The 80s Hits and the Trivia, right here in Newstalk 1010. It's 11:45. First, it's time.